Hello, greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet, and today we are going to be talking about crackers and the culture war. Now, for those of you who may not have heard the news, and this probably includes most normal human beings who aren't chronically online, live streamers and content creators Vaush and Hasan Abi were recently suspended by the Twitch platform for usage of the word cracker. Now, of note here is that these two content creators combined generate roughly $10 million a year in total ad revenue for the platforms that host their content. So, while this might not be relevant to a lot of people, there is A, a lot of money involved, and B, more importantly in the macro sense, this specific battle over usage of this specific word may very well become the next pitch battle in the overall culture wars going on here in the United States of America. So what I wanted to do today was to use this event as an opportunity to explain words, word roots, word etymology, and word usage through the centuries, bringing us to where words are today, why they're being used, and why this decision by Twitch is quite literally one of the worst decisions in a long line of really bad decisions that they have ever made. So everybody, buckle up. It's class time. Let's learn about some words. Here we go. Let's jump right into today's educational word lesson by learning about cracker. Cracker, sometimes white cracker or cracka, you know, when you just feel like you need to leave off the hard R because you're trying to be chill, is a racial epithet directed towards white people, used especially with regard to poor rural whites in the southern United States. It is sometimes used in a neutral context in reference to a native of Florida or Georgia. Now, as you can see, right in that description is the term racial epithet. For the record, epithet is an addition to a word or a condition, i.e. Alexander the Great would be an epithet. However, in this regard, they are saying that it has a negative connotation. I am not going to argue with this. However, I just want to point it out because we're going to return to it later. Now, although the word had been in use for literally centuries over in England and northeastern Europe in a number of different non-racial contexts, the first ever usage of it as a pejorative term was found in writing here in the United States in 1783 by Benjamin Franklin, who used it to describe former convicts who were transported from Great Britain to Virginia and their descendants. Apparently, those people were a race of renegades and crackers equally wild and savage as the Indians who inhabited the deserted woods and mountains. As you can see, this term, as a pejorative, was first created by a, quote, white person to describe other, quote, white people. In 1947, the student body of Florida State University voted on the name of their athletic symbol. From a list of more than 100 choices, Seminoles was selected. The other finalists in order of finish were Statesmen, Rebels, Tarpons, Fighting Warriors, and Crackers. Before the Milwaukee Braves baseball team moved to Atlanta, the Atlanta minor league baseball team was known as the Atlanta Crackers. That was where they played and how they existed until 1965. You know, just in case you're one of those people who's angry that the Washington football team is being leveraged into changing their names from the Redskins to some other name that they're eventually going to come up with, but meanwhile they're just calling themselves the Washington football team because it's a great signal flare in the culture wars. Singer-songwriter Randy Newman on his socio-politically themed album Good Old Boys from 1974 uses the term cracker on the song Kingfish, quote, I'm a cracker, you're one too, gonna take good care of you. The subject of the song is Huey Long, who was a populist governor and then senator for the state of Louisiana until 1935. And then, of course, everybody's personal favorite, in 2008, former President Bill Clinton used the term cracker on Larry King Live to describe white voters he was attempting to win over for Barack Obama. Quote, you know, they think that because of who I am and where my political base has traditionally been, they may want me to go sort of hustle up what Lawton Childs used to call the cracker vote. Yes, former President Bill Clinton, a very, quote, white person, literally used the term cracker in 2008 to describe his constituency on national fucking cable television. Now, because, quote, white people continued to use the term to describe themselves, eventually other non-white people then took the term and threw it back at them as a pejorative, not the least of whom was Malcolm X. And now you can see why people are angry about using the word cracker as a pejorative. They didn't mind it when white people used the term cracker to discuss other white people, or white people jokingly used the word amongst themselves. There was no problem. But once a non-white person used the word cracker as a pejorative, oh, well then, now it became bad. And apparently, now here in 2021, that we're refighting the culture wars, you know, like CRT being in schools, because nobody actually knows what the fuck CRT is, and yet it's now being used as an excuse to pull books out of history classes because they contain speeches given by Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, you know that culture war? Well, the word cracker apparently is now being used by people to describe other white people, and well, those white people aren't very happy about it. So now we're going to have to go deeper past the usage of the word cracker to get to the very scary place. And that place is discussing and understanding what white people are. Get ready for education word lesson number 2 of today. Now, again, we're going to start off this word lesson here on Wikipedia, only because the vast amount of text here in the descriptor is pulled from the reference material listed below. And frankly, now we're getting into a murky place where different historians and sociologists may use slight different turns of phrase to describe things, but this is essentially the basic root derivation of the word so we can understand where white people come from. White is a racialized classification of people and a skin color specifier generally used for people of European origin, although the definition can vary depending on context, nationality, and point of view. In the U.S., this term has at times even been expanded to encompass persons of South Asian, West Asian, and North African descent persons who are often considered, quote, non-white in other contexts in the United States. Now, if you need to know what the hell we could possibly be talking about when we're saying white people and then pointing to people from places and continents such as Asia or Africa, perhaps an example might better help show you what we're talking about here. Yeah, so this guy right here, yeah, his name is Farouk Bulsara. He's from Tanzania, Africa. Yeah. So in case you were wondering why sometimes people will, use the word white to describe people who are traditionally not from, quote, white places, this is a sterling example. The usage of white people or a white race for a large group of mainly or exclusively European populations defined by their light skin, among other physical characteristics, and contrasting with black, red, brown, yellow, and other, quote, colored people, or, quote, persons of color, originated in the 17th century in Europe. Gee, I wonder what was going on in the 17th century in Europe that made such a distinction necessary because before the 17th century, there was no existence of, quote, white people. I mean, there were people who had a skin tone similar to me and a lot of other people who are watching, but there were no, quote, white people. 17th century in Europe. I wonder what the hell was going on. The term white race or white people entered the major European languages in the latter 17th century in the context of racialized slavery and unequal social status in the European colonies. That's right, white people decided to start calling themselves white people to distinguish themselves from all of the other people who had darker skin tones, whose nations they conquered and whose people they took as slaves and then sold as human cattle to other white people from white races all around the world. Description of populations as white in reference to their skin color predates 17th century European slave culture and is occasionally found in Greco-Roman and other ancient and or medieval sources. But these societies did not have any notion of a white pan-European race. Scholarship on race distinguishes the modern concept from pre-modern descriptions which focused on physical complexion rather than race. In other words, take all these big words and all these descriptions aside and compress it, and what they are telling you is that the term as we use it today, white people who are part of some kind of a white race, did not exist before slavery. And it is, in fact, a social construct. There is no white race. If you have a complexion like this, you are not a white person. You are a descendant of people from any other country filled with, quote, white people, or you could very well just say that you are an American if you were born here in the United States of America. However, that starts to get murky because now you have to separate race from ethnicity. And this is where the racial modifier kicks in. Quote, before the age of exploration, group differences were largely based on language, religion, and geography. The Europeans had always reacted a bit hysterically to the differences of skin color and facial structure between themselves and the populations encountered in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. See, for example, Shakespeare's dramatization of racial conflict in Othello and The Tempest. Beginning in the 1500s, Europeans began to develop what became known as scientific racism, which was the attempt to construct a biological rather than cultural definition of race. And that definition and that term was whiteness, and it emerged as what we now call a pan-ethnic category as a way of merging a variety of European ethnic populations into a single race. So again, for a second time, whiteness or white people is a construct. It is not a biological term. More importantly, this construct was created by white people to define themselves and other people like them as white people. Before this, for thousands of years, there were people, cultures, and societies all over the world who would continuously bump into each other, who looked different, and at no point did they go, ugh, white person, or ugh, black person, we must be superior to them because look at the color of our skin. That wasn't a thing. This was only created a few hundred years ago by white Europeans who were deeply ensconced in slaver culture. In the British colonies in North America and the Caribbean, the designation English or Christian was initially used in contrast to Native Americans or Africans. Early appearances of white race or white people in the Oxford English Dictionary began in the 17th century. Historian Winthrop Jordan reports that, quote, throughout the 13 colonies, the terms Christian, free, English, and white were all employed indiscriminately in the 17th century as proxies for one another. In 1680, Morgan Godwin, quote, found it necessary to explain to English readers that in Barbados, white was the general name for Europeans. Why? Because none of the people back in Europe knew that they were white people. They just knew they were from whatever country it was that they lived in Europe, and whatever countries in Europe that their ancestors came from. Again, the vast majority of humanity didn't ask for any of this. It was only a handful of people, comparative to the overall global population, who felt the need to socially, biologically, and ethnically separate themselves from all of the other people that they were conquering and enslaving. And so now all of this is going to bring us to the larger question and issue, which is, can a white person be deemed racist for saying bad things about another white person's whiteness? Now, we have already determined that there is no such thing as a white race, that white is a social construct which was invented by a handful of people who wanted to own and dominate a whole bunch of other people who had darker skin than them, and then come up with a term to describe themselves and their own superiority because they were the conquerors and the colonizers rather than the conquered or the colonized. Could a white person using the term cracker to disparage another white person really be racist if there is no white race? I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm going to leave it to far greater minds than my own. You know, like censors at social media platforms who are canceling people during this great culture war because snowflakes have thin skin and get easily offended. So for the last time, I will say this to all of you at home in full fucking frame, just in case you missed it the first 6 times. You are not white. There is no such thing as white people. You are descended of other people from other places who predominantly had pale skin. This might be the first time you're hearing about any of this. Maybe you've never considered the difference between biology, geography, race, and social construct. And so this is hitting you like a ton of bricks. And if it is, hey, I'm sorry if this is coming off a little harsh, but I've had to have this conversation quite literally thousands of times. And you know what most people do? La, 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 la. And they go on propping up and defending whiteness because without realizing it, they have already accepted a personal identity of, quote, a white person. Please, everybody, for the love of God, stop proliferating whiteness. Nothing good ever came of it, and nothing good ever will. Until next time, my name is James. I am from the internet, and I am out. Peace.